Now that your clay is a little sturdier, you can pick it up and continue to smooth the edges. Feel free to use a little bit of water or a slightly damp sponge if needed to help you get that nice and smooth. Be careful to not make it sticky and wet though. Quickly wipe down your flattened coil as well, just to make sure it bends nice and easily. Get your folded printer paper and line it up with the best part of your flattened coil, and then you're going to cut at each end. You'll end up with a flattened coil, or a slab, 11 inches long. This will be long enough to overlap when we wrap it around into a cylinder. If you don't have a ruler or straight edge handy, you can use your folded paper to mark the edges of your flattened coil and cut them off. You want to have a nice, even, long rectangle that we can use for the base of our cylinder. Next up, you're going to use your serrated rib to score one edge of your flattened slab. What you're going to do here is press it on a 45-degree angle to create a beveled edge that is nice and scored. This will give you more surface area to adhere it to your base. Do the same thing on the edges of your circle. What you want to do here again is create a 45-degree bevel that is scored all the way around on one side of your base. Here's an up-close shot of how this will look. Now you're going to apply a light layer of slip to both beveled edges, on the side of your flattened coil and on your base. Be careful not to use too much, though if you do, you can just use your sponge to clean it up a little bit. It is important to do this on both sides. Now we're going to start assembling. Pick this up gently and place it right on the circle base. This should be on top of your base, not next to it. Since they're both 45-degree angles, it should meet up pretty well. You want to compress that with your fingertips and slowly work it in. Once you pick it up, don't put it back down, leave it on here. Now you'll see a nice overlap. We're going to mark this with our fettling knife on a 45-degree angle and cut through both layers. You're going to support this with your fingers while you gently slide the knife down through the clay, making a straight line all the way down to the base. You'll then be able to peel off the extra pieces of clay that you won't need, and you'll end up with two 45-degree bevels that line up perfectly. Use your serrated rib and score both sides, both beveled edges. Then you're going to brush a light layer of slip onto both edges, and you're going to move these into alignment. You're going to start by compressing at the very bottom of the cylinder so you can join these two pieces. Now watch when I join these. You're going to see excess slip squish out. That's good. And notice how I've overlapped it. In other words, it's overlapped a little too far. That's because when I compress this down, it's going to come back into an even thickness. If I had started with these perfectly lined up, when I try to smooth it out, they're going to move further apart and the clay will be too thin. Start smoothing this out with your fingertips and wipe off any excess slip. Then you're going to rotate the pot if needed and start smoothing the inside of it. So it's important that we don't see any seams. However, when I'm doing this, I'm supporting the clay on the outside. This isn't just about looking smooth, this is about joining the clay and making the connection permanent. As you look at this from the top, you want to make sure this is making a circle, so press the slab gently if needed to keep it round. Now let's clean up that bottom edge. You can see the rough edges from the scored slab. You're going to go around with your fingertips and gently compress all the way around. You want to make sure that the clay is really well adhered. You're also smoothing as you go here to continue to merge the wall to the base. Now bring in those pencils and line them up with the sides and get down to eye level to look at it. You want to make sure that your slab walls are going vertical. Look straight down from the top and make sure it is still a circle. Gently flip this over onto its rim. Use your serrated rib and compress in a downward motion. This will help attach the base to the walls a little bit more securely, and this will redistribute the clay so it's easier to smooth. Place this upright again as needed, and you can move your serrated rib sideways. Remember, you're not so much scraping off clay as gently compressing out the bumps and redistributing the clay. Now come in with your smooth rib and start compressing. Move in an upward motion very gently as you support the wall on the inside. You can also move back and forth. You can use fingertips, whatever you need to do to get the surface nice and smooth. Be gentle with the clay so you don't end up pinching it too thin anywhere. Sometimes I like to bevel the corners of my base. The handle of your fettling knife can work well for this. Just work your way nice and gently to create that bevel. Then you can use your fettling knife to trim off any excess clay that's sticking out anywhere. Continue alternating with your serrated rib and smoothing tools as needed until you have a nice, even, consistent base. Only if your clay is a little bit too dry, you can use your sponge. Whoops, a little too much water there. Squeeze it out. Use your sponge and gently smooth it. Now, don't use the sponge too much. It actually erodes the clay, and adding too much water makes it weak and soft. So avoid too much water, only use it if you need it. Finish off with that smooth rib, fingers, whatever you need to do to get this nice and smooth. Spend a little time with your fingertips and smooth in an upward motion, back and forth, whatever you need to get this nice and even, smooth, sturdy, and round. Remember, this is just the base of your cylinder. We're going to add on another flattened coil tomorrow. Get down to eye level and check again with your pencils. Check out the sides. I like to turn this and use the flat side of my smoothing rib to give a final compression on the edges. If you notice any low spots, you can get a finger on the inside and gently smooth while pushing out until you get a nice even wall. Now take a look at the inside. Do you see that crack there? If that remains, this crack could grow later and make this not food safe. We're going to need to fill that in with a coil. Grab a really small chunk of soft clay, squeeze that, begin making a coil, similar to how we did before, only this one is way skinnier. We want this clay to be super soft, so you can actually sponge a tiny bit of water on your newspaper. Here I'm doing just a little bit too much, but what this does is it allows us to roll the coil right on that damp newspaper, which keeps it from drying out. If it gets a little too wet, you can take that off and finish on the dry paper. We want a really thin coil, definitely skinnier than a pencil. This is just going to help us seal the inside to the outside. Brush in some slip, making sure to fill in the crack. Now we're going to bring in the coil. Hold it in one hand while you use the fingertips in the other to press it into that corner. You want to work your way slowly around the edges to squeeze out any air. It's okay if you see a little excess slip squish out. Now don't push too hard. We don't want to bulge out the pot at this point. When you get back to where you started, you can carefully tear off any excess coil. Now we want to come in and smooth this. Your finger is really the best tool here. Again, be gentle. You don't want to push out the walls of the pot. You can also try using one of your clay tools to continue smoothing down on this bottom. When you do that, sometimes it pushes the clay in with a little bit more pressure. That's fine. You're just going to come back with your finger and smooth it out. The goal here is to have a smooth transition from the floor to the wall with no cracks, bumps, or dents. Give this one last touch up with the straight edge of your rib. When you have a nice even cylinder, you are done. We want to allow this to set up a little bit before we attach the next piece. Pick up any scraps of clay you have laying around and put them in your scrap bag. If needed, add a little water, and then you want to twist it shut really well so there's no air trapped inside. Place the bottom half of your cylinder on your plastic covered project board. What we want to do here is equalize the moisture content by covering this up. Think about where the slip was. Those areas are wetter, softer clay than the walls of the pot. So by covering this, the moisture levels will equalize. Grab a damp paper towel, making sure you've squeezed all the water out of it. Then unfold it just enough to drape it over the top of your pot. Finally, get a soft plastic bag and drape it over top of your project. You don't want to put it inside the bag, rather place the 2 layers of plastic on top and tuck it in underneath. This will help the moisture equalize overnight, and the paper towel will prevent it from drying too much. Later, we'll attach another flattened coil to the pot to reach our desired height of the mug. Then we'll attach a handle and refine.